Hello, and welcome to No Fences. My name is Earnest Spencer. My guest is Dexter Mitchell, and he's going to be my guest tonight on No Fences. Tonight, this is kind of a follow-up of what me and Mike have been doing, and I'm going to read a couple of quotes. The first one is, it's easier to build a strong child than to repair broken men. That was written by Frederick Douglass. There's another one here. It says, the sponge. And this was written, it doesn't give who it was. It's sent out to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 children, and it says from a father and a stepfather. When we are born, we are like new sponges. We are clean and empty. There's neither love nor hate. A baby's like a sponge. He stays in and absorbs whatever is in the atmosphere in which he is living. If the atmosphere is full of love, support, kindness, honesty, fair play, and ethics thinking, acceptance of others, etc., this is what will be absorbed. If the atmosphere is full of hate, distrust, lying, drugs, or alcohol abuse, bigotry, racism, selfishness, this is what he or she will absorb. And then we got a couple more here. Oh, this one real quick by Mike. It says, the greatest power we have as a human being is to make a choice. And then there's one more here by Mike. It says, live so that when children and others think of fairness, truth, caring, and integrity, they think of you. Now, Dexter has a child or two. I know he has two. I'm just messing with him. And Dexter is, you might have seen him on another show that I do, but great man in my eyes.
Thank you.
He's come to Kalamazoo to do some positive things, and he's already doing some of those things in the township. But I know he's done some youth work, and he's ran some park districts and things similar to that. So I know he has a lot of knowledge with kids. So I asked him to come on the show so we could talk about, I'm sure he's read this chapter we discussed. Read the first paragraph to get us started. It says, we know that all children are like sponges. They see and repeat everything they hear. Sometimes, to our embarrassment, there is nothing most of us who have ever been around children or more than 5 minutes don't already know. And, you know, we have talked about my granddaughter. You know, I talked to you about her, my great-granddaughter, actually, and how she acts like her mother, and how I've been working to change that. And you know, I sat down and talked to you about it. Mm-hmm. And I told you what happened at my sister's house, where, you know, we were there from Tuesday to Sunday. The first 10 minutes we were there, my sister turned it around. She did her little thing. My sister said, no, we don't act like that in this house. And the atmosphere is just so mellow and calm. You know, and it's like 100 toys, because my sister got all these toys for her grandkids. And she said, those are all their toys. You can't just take their toys from them, but I'm not going to let them take those toys from you, because you're as important to me as they are, because you are my brother's granddaughter. And she was mellow the whole time we were there, except for the 2 times she cracked her head open. But, you know, that is what, you know, you and I have talked about, and how kids influence. And I know you're raising great kids because you're a great man. And you can see, it says right here, it says, when you look at a child, well, I said that because it's true, but also, man, you talked about growing up and how our parents influenced us.
We did. We talked about that. We talked about how our parents, things happen. And when you talk about taking your grandchild over to your sister's house, one of the stories is my children and my wife and I went to my father-in-law's house for a Christmas party. Now, I have nieces and nephews on both sides, and we just happen to be on my wife's side this time. Mm-hmm. So I hope she doesn't get me in trouble for this. But it's a true story. So we're sitting there, and 2 of my nephews are literally bouncing on the couch. And so I look over at my son, and he's looking at me and looking at them like, you gonna say something to him, Dad? You gonna say something to him? And I'm like, no, you my responsibility. And he just kind of looked up at me and said, I'm not gonna do that. Right. I said, okay. You see it, you absorb it, and you reflect that ability, and to the embarrassment or to the good or to the bad, children will often say what goes on in the house. And so by my son doing that, he's saying, hey, look, we don't bounce on the furniture. And I'm like, no, we don't bounce on the furniture.
Right.
So you can see them doing that. Now, the good thing would have been if he'd have said, hey, look, don't bounce on the furniture. But once again, it wasn't his house.
Right.
And so sometimes you can't impose those values on. Now, they eventually did stop bouncing on the furniture, but they went and started doing some other stuff. And again, they're boys, they're young, it's Christmas time, they're rambunctious. I got all that. But it's the home training that hopefully we pour enough into them that when they go out into the world can't punch holes into it to empty that cup out.
Right.
And that's the analogy that I keep trying to impose on my children and install to them, is that yes, we stay positive, we stay upbeat, we look for the best of everything. Do we know that there's going to be bad things out there? Absolutely. That's the world we live in. But if you look for the positive, if you're playing the optimist card all the time, more than likely, and I'm talking 80% of the time, you come out on the sunny side.
Yep. And it worked with her, and and then we went to a restaurant. I told you my daughter got that award. She got a scholarship award. My oldest daughter. Proud of you, so proud of you, you know that. And she was doing this, when she invited me to it, I went, and Don Cooney and a couple of other people, he's one of the instructors. We went to a really nice restaurant, really nice, and Western picked up the bill, I'm talking. So, about a week later, I called my daughter up, I said, look, I'm gonna take the young girls to a restaurant. They got waitresses and waiters and cloth napkins, and you sit down, because their mothers are not going to take them. And Teresa said, that's a great idea. I said, it's okay, I'm inviting you to dinner. So we went to the restaurant that serves Italian food. And it didn't matter what it cost, because it wasn't about what it cost, but, the 6-year-old, she was right into it, because I've taken her place before. The 2.5-year-old, she was like, okay. Man brought her a plate, Teresa said, she said, I want some spaghetti. So we had ordered them a pizza, and Teresa said, okay, you gotta ask better than that. And she said, I said, okay, what is the magic word? She said, can I please have some spaghetti? So man brought a plate. Teresa told her to say thank you, brought her a plate. And she didn't say thank you. So Teresa said, you gotta say thank you. She wouldn't say thank you. Teresa took a little plate, put some spaghetti on it, sat it right next to her, and said, when you tell that man thank you, you can have this plate. And I almost went there. Teresa said, no, Dad, just leave him alone. Give it 2 minutes. She crossed her arms and did that. About a minute into it, Teresa said, you want the spaghetti? She said, yes, TT. She said, well, what I got? She said, well, you know what you got to do. She turned around to the man and she said, thank you for bringing the plate, and I'm sorry. So my daughter's teaching me, with all the stuff I do with children, because part of her degree is working with children. Okay, and then she's working on a law degree. And again, what you just said, what we put into them, we put it in, we get it back. And her mother's is that same kind of attitude, that same kind of, and Teresa, said, Dad, don't do that. I said, come on, Teresa. She said, no, that's what she's expecting, because that's what she gets at home, the conflict, instantly. So she crosses her arm and waits for the conflict, because that's what she expects to get. Don't give it to her, and she'll change instantly. And it worked. So, like you said, what we pour in, and if we pour it in right, they can't punch holes in it later on.
Even if they do, it's still thick enough to go through. And so when we talked about that, and when I was reading that chapter about sponges, one of my personal mentors is Bishop T.D. Jakes.
Okay.
And T.D. Jakes had a series at one time that was called Nothing Just Happens. And he tells a story of a gentleman by the name of Larry. And Larry grew up in a city. Larry went off to college. Larry became an architect. Larry came back. And Larry is working for an architectural firm that they have parties every other Friday during the pay week. And Larry hasn't gone out with them. So the boss says, hey, Larry, you work for us and we hang out on a Friday. It's a team building exercise. We go to the bar. And Larry says, well, I don't really go to the bar. I don't really drink. He goes, I'm happily married, and, my father has some issues with alcohol. And so his boss says, okay, you know what, Larry? You're absolutely right. We won't do it. So next Friday comes, Larry leaves, the team goes out, they pick a new joint to go to, new bar, and they're hanging out, and the boss is having a couple drinks, and he looks over, and he sees Larry, and Larry's just pounding the drinks back. So the boss says, that son of a gun, you know what? He didn't want to hang out with us, but he's over here drinking. He said, I'm going to say something to him. So he walks up to the guy, and he says, Larry, what are you doing? I thought you didn't drink. And the guy looks at him, looks him dead in his face, he goes, oh no, you're talking about my brother. My name is Jerry. See, we're twins. He goes, oh, your brother said you didn't drink. He said, well, that's him. We grew up, Jerry goes to the bar every Friday. Jerry drinks, Jerry comes back and is abusive to his spouse. Two twins. Choose today what you want to do. You can grow up in that environment, but that change, Larry chose to go one way, Jerry, the other twin, went a different way. So part of Mike's quote in there was that we have choices, and as human beings, that's the most powerful thing we can do is to choose. You know what's right from wrong. You choose this day how you want to act, how you want to behave, how you want to come about. So when you're pouring that in, even good kids who have made bad mistakes and ended up, or momentary lapse in judgments, has gone through it. And our ex-president, the 44th president, President Obama, once said, because he wrote about his substance use, he was still smoking cigarettes from time to time and some cocaine use. And he wrote about that in his book. And he said, but by the grace of God, go I. And there are other people who can say, but by the grace of God, there go I. And some people get caught. You need to choose what you want to do. Doing things in moderation, overdoing things in moderation. And children see what you're doing, spouses see what you're doing, neighbors see what you're doing, church members see what you're doing.
And you know, I can relate to that directly with the extreme change in my household. You know, I've been clean for 9 months now. I have no problem, you know, talking about my problem might help somebody else. And I know that my higher power brought me here through that. But I see the difference in my grandchildren and the young folks that I deal with in youth programs and stuff when I talk about that. I was working with Don Cooney a while back on a program we had at Washington Writers Academy. I've had 4 grandchildren go through there, and I've got 2 in there now. Washington Writers Academy, we were doing an after-school program. So I come in one morning because the particular where I was living at the time, the bus didn't come there, so I drove my grandkids to school in the morning. And I got there, and one of the teachers, principal's office, said, "Can you help us?" I said, "What?" She said, I know you work with kids, we know what you do, but you work with the after-school program here, so you know most of these kids. And I said, "Yes, I do." She said, "Well, we got 6 kids over there for fighting." Okay, we have 6 kids over there for fighting. And she said, "That's only half of them because we only brought the ones that we started to fight." So I talked to the kids, and I took my time. She gave me about a half hour. And I spent 7, 8 minutes with each one of them. And actually, she gave me about an hour. And I found out that almost every one of them, I found out that every one of them either had parents on drugs, alcohol, they hadn't eaten good meals, or they were forced to keep their brothers and sisters while the adults did whatever the adults did. So basically, they all came to school angry. And that anger boils over onto somebody else. So it's what's put in at home, like you said, that makes it what it is. Give me a minute.
It's what's put in at home. It's all that. And now, you know, I have a teenager who's 17 as well, who's anxious to get out on her own. And I'm like, take your time. You're living at home now. When young folks start looking at it, don't forget that credit card bill comes every month. Consumer's energy comes every month. That mortgage or rent comes every month. That car note comes every month. That gas bill comes every month. These are expenses that start stacking up. Now, you think that your parents handle it well because they've, budgeted over time. But when we all start off living on our own and doing those things, it's a lot of pressure. Now, imagine that pressure and you don't have the maturity to handle it. Right. You're in elementary school. You start to lash out. You start to act out. Oh, they're at risk. They're at this. And you start putting these labels on kids. And as they start going, they start choosing, and if they start believing the labels that are put on them already, they start to slip towards what they believe. If you tell a kid that they're good, they'll be good. If you tell a kid that they're bad, they'll be bad.
Thank you guys for watching. We're going to continue this in the next segment. Thanks. Good night.